Has this been here the whole time? Wow. Anyway, this has been a good chance to talk about the recent big Dungeons & Dragons news announcement from D&D Celebration that just happened over the weekend. And that's the 24th to the 26th of September for all you future watchers. During the sort of closing segment of D&D Celebration, Ray Winiger, head of D&D, Liz Shue, head of publishing, Chris Perkins, head story designer, and Jeremy Crawford, head rules designer, joined Elle O'Silly Woods to talk about the future of D&D. There's a number of announcements and vague hints about future products, but I want to jump into the big juicy clickbait steak right now. Ray Winiger talked about the 50th anniversary of D&D is coming up and revealed that this year, Wizards of the Coast has officially begun work on the next evolution of Dungeons & Dragons, with new rulebooks scheduled for 2024. Ray specifically called out the surveys over the last year directed at the Player's Handbook and other core surveys from Wizards as being a part of this process and driving a lot of the design intentions and ambitions. And there's more surveys to come to help shape that design process. He also called out that these new books will be fully compatible with existing books and materials, and that there will be cool new things in the digital arena, new D&D experiences. So what does that all mean? Well, if you're new to Dungeons & Dragons, this probably seems very wild and scary to you. Does this mean you have to go and buy all new books? Will this change your game completely? Why are they doing this? Don't worry, this isn't anything new. Wizards of the Coast and even old TSR back in the day have done this sort of thing before. This does not seem to be an entirely new edition of Dungeons & Dragons. In fact, most fans online are referring to this as 5.5 edition, a throwback to when Wizards of the Coast did the same thing with the 3rd edition D&D, updating and revising the rule set based on feedback and to fix issues with the 3rd edition rule set. This next evolution of D&D appears to be the same thing, a revision of the current 5th edition rules with tweaks and adjustments to improve the game and have it match the evolution of D&D from being a purely combat-focused game to one with more narrative and non-combat options. If this was a completely new edition of Dungeons & Dragons, like how the game changed from 3rd edition to 4th edition or 4th edition to 5th edition, I don't believe Ray and the others would have used the specific phrasing they did or announced it as they did. By stating that the new books will be fully compatible with the current resources, as well as announcing several big campaign settings releasing just a year or two before, I will come to these in just a minute, it would be pretty unlikely for this 2024 evolution to be a completely unfamiliar system. 5th edition has been a huge success for the D&D team and Wizards of the Coast and Big Daddy Hasbro, and straying too far from the system will only lead to another 4th edition incident. And as much as I loved 4th edition for its changes and uniqueness, a lot of people didn't. I personally predict we will see something along the lines of big changes to races and how they are handled. I expect a rename to species lineage, and they'll follow the pattern they've been going with in the recent books such as Van Richten's Guide and Wild Beyond the Witchlight, aka the removal of ability score bonuses and penalties, more choices in size and creature type, and a focus on kind of key racial traits. I'll be pretty happy with this if it happens. I'm actually already doing this to the Player's Handbook races for my own campaign setting, which I'm hoping to reveal more of next year. Also, I expect more non-combat focused abilities for player characters, possibly more guidance on non-combat activities for DMs, and a lean towards offering more narrative gameplay overall. Revisions of monsters will line up with a new monster design, favouring the recent additions like interesting actions, reactions, and traits, condensed spell casting, and the removal of any problematic content. We'll get a preview into this design sooner than 2024, and keep watching to learn a bit more about that. I'd like to see a brand new Dungeon Master's Guide with better information flow and design layout, and maybe a little bit more, well, I don't know, actual tools and advice for Dungeon Masters. This is something Wizards of the Coast seems to acknowledge as being an issue in some of their adventures, so fingers crossed the DMG gets the same treatment. I expect a bigger focus on digital books, bigger profits, less costs, less delivery issues in the middle of pandemics where boats get stuck in a canal like a stepsister in a dodgy anime, and lots more. But those are some of my core guesses. Let me know some of yours in the comments. As for the whole cool new things in the digital arena, well, I can make some loose guesses here, but this is very much just my own gut feelings. As Wizards of the Coast doesn't own D&D Beyond, but has seen how hugely influential and successful it has been, I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to change that relationship, develop their own tools, buy it outright, etc. D&D Beyond has been a literal game changer for D&D 5th edition, and I think Wizards of the Coast would be silly not to want to build around it for the future. As a note, I'd also love a subscription service or app that gives me all of the rules books in digital formats, which only Wizards of the Coast is really in a position to be able to do. Another key thing could be virtual tabletops. The pandemic and changes to adult lives in general have seen programs like Roll20 and Foundry and various others all boom. I think a revised edition of the rules with a core Wizards of the Coast owned virtual tabletop with built-in rules and maps and monsters from the books is a business no-brainer. I also think streaming will be a factor in this new revised strategy in some form. Being a little biased here, but D&D streaming, such as the hilarious down-to-earth antics of British D&D show High Rollers, has been a huge boon to 5th edition's success. Crit Roll and various other shows have brought in staggering amounts of new players that Wizards of the Coast very clearly want to listen and appeal to. That said, I actually personally hope that the game's design doesn't try to factor in streaming into it. I want the game to be the best game it can be for at the table between friends first. Streamers can always find ways to make the game work, and entertainment will add features, etc. as they need to. The game system doesn't need special rules or little gimmicks designed just for streaming. So in summary, don't panic. No need to throw out all of your books just yet. In 2024, I think we will see a brand new Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual, but at best, I think the only thing you'll need is the Player's Handbook. Everything else should still be usable, relevant, as long as the D&D team keep this compatibility promise. If I'm going to the trouble of telling you all about the big announcement and I convince you to click this video with my SEO-focused title, well, I may as well tell you about some of the other stuff D&D mentioned in the panel as well. Ray talks about D&D heading into the multiverse, referring to earlier statements about revitalizing old D&D settings with 3 classic settings in development. Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft was the first, and next year in 2022, both of the other classic settings will be published, both in new formats never seen before. Also, a 3rd classic setting will be getting a little cameo, and then in 2023, another classic setting will be getting a release as well. Jeremy Crawford talks about new players coming into D&D, how they're listening to the new and old players alike, exploring the new styles of play, like Wilds Beyond the Witchlight, with a heavy non-combat focus, but it also means they're revising how they design monster spells and how D&D is growing and evolving. Jeremy mentions that the response to adventure anthologies like Candlekeep Mysteries was very positive, and they're working on new adventure anthologies in the same style. Liz Shue refers to the new format and mentions making it easier to play at the table, better onboarding for new players and veteran fans, creating the best experience, etc. She mentions experimenting a fair bit and with plenty of references to technology as well. I'd suspect this means a lot more digital publishing tools, maybe making use of places like DM's Guild, possibly even having digital PDF releases on there as well. Chris Perkins talked all about listening to players, what they struggle with, what they enjoy, how they're presented. Wild Beyond the Witchlight changed some of the layout and flow of the book because of this, with better tools and easier management for DMs, making it so DMs can handle and run these big adventures. Lots of interesting feedback, all of this part of this new design philosophy we'll be seeing in the revised rulebook. Chris also mentions that there will be a blog post coming soon with more details about what's being changed and what may be coming as well. Liz and Jeremy both talk about a brand new rules expansion gift set that includes Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Xanathar's Guide, but also a new book called Monsters of the Multiverse. This new book is basically a collection of monsters and playable races from other material with updated rules, art, and making it more setting agnostic. The book will be a little preview at some of the design changes coming for the 2024 rule revision, but is also partially seen in some of the new books coming out, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, Strixhaven, etc. There's rebalances, changes, updates, new art, 30 playable races. All races outside the Player's Handbook will be made setting agnostic, aka they won't be tied to specific places, as well as 250 plus monsters as well. Oh, and it's all been properly alphabetized, no subcategories of alphabetization. Jeremy actually showed off some stuff from Monsters of the Multiverse, generally talking about the rebalancing, condensing of information. It was all a little bit too small for me to read with my tiny mole eyes, but one thing Jeremy specifically called to action was the new War Priest, going over major changes to the way spellcasting is being handled by monsters. I can make a whole video on this, but in summary, it's about reducing the amount of looking stuff up the DM has to do on the fly, rebalancing the monsters so that the stat block provides everything it needs to match its CR, there, rather than it relying on specific spells being used, etc., and combat abilities being cleaner, with the NPC still retaining spells to use in a non-combat manner. As a sidebar, I think this is a sneaky Jeremy sneaking in some 4th edition monster design, which I'm very keen on. As a DM, seeing a monster with like 9 levels of spells, a million spell slots to track, balancing actions, and all other traits, etc., is a pain. I can do it, I've been doing it for a very long time, but it is annoying. This new monster design seems to be much more fluid for the uses in a battle as well as out. And finally, Chris Perkins talks about 2 brand new settings for publication. He actually compared it to the release of Eberron, where it's a fully brand new idea. He also talked about how a lot of what the D&D team work on is in the exploration phase, where they're testing stuff out and trying new ideas. There was also a very vague tease about a new product in 2022, taking players to a very scary place they have never seen before, and cover art with a sketch with Boo from Baldur's Gate on it. Very, very strange. And that's it, a full recap of what went down at D&D Celebration, but the big news is that D&D is working on new rulebooks for 2024. It's expected this revised version of the 5th edition rule set will take into account all the surveys, feedback, and general tonal shifts of the D&D audience over the last few years. Will it be good? Will it be bad? I have no idea, but it will be very cool to see what it's all about. I hope this video answered some of your questions or concerns. Thanks very much for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.